Firstly, educated people are also dying from deaths of despair at an expedited rate. Certainly not at the level of non-educated people who are tasked with a system that is already against them, right? I talked about that issue more in this video, also related to some mechanisms such as lack of parental figures. But as we see in this article on around 70,000 female nurses and 44,000 male health care professionals, including dentists and pharmacists, careers which require substantial education, researchers found that compared with those who never attend religious services, those who do at least once per week had 68% lower likelihood of a death from despair in the nursing study with the female nurses, and a 33% lower likelihood in the male healthcare professional study. And just to situate, healthcare professionals have a suicide rate 2 times more than of the general population. And without any internal mechanism to make sense of suffering or social element which values spirituality, we'll see the casualties more and more and more, because these trends are increasing. We need to really examine that, and they're increasing at an expedited rate, right? And again, the film Doctor Strange is another film that I touch on, but I think it's appropriate here because the character Dr. Stephen Strange encapsulates this idea prior to his spiritual conversion. He is this super rationalistic, no nonsense, very affluent, very rich surgeon who undergoes a personal difficulty and loses hope. He loses any sense of meaning or purpose. He becomes depressed until he eventually travels to the east and becomes Doctor Strange, right? We watched that movie, but for many people, they don't have that, that shift, right? That fall from grace, that fall from their pride, and then, character renewal, right? Many people are just stopping there, losing sense of hope, losing sense of suffering, and a death from despair. As it says in the article, religion may be associated with strengthened psychosocial resilience by fostering a sense of peace and positive outlook, promoting social connectedness, and encouraging engagement in pro-social activities. But yes, the point does hold. Educated people tend to do better on all accounts. But what if we compare groups on all health domains, including physical, social, psychological, behavioral health domains, between religious persons, non-affiliated religious persons, that is people who are religious but they don't nominally identify as Christian, Catholic, Muslim, agnostic, and atheist people? This is a very interesting study on about 3,000 US adults, the overwhelming majority of whom were Christian, and demographic differences were found, such as women being a lot more religious, along with Black and Hispanic individuals also being more religious, which I talked about extensively in this video right here. We also see that this trend line from the first study, the trends of women and also minority individuals affiliating with religion are decreasing, but they are still statistically more religious than white men, especially educated white men. Atheist and agnostic individuals also tend to have higher levels of education than the other two groups, and they also tend to be much younger, especially as compared to the religious group. What did the researchers find? Well, individuals who reported any religious affiliation had significantly higher mean BMI, body mass index, as well as a higher mean ADL, activities of daily life limitations, and they reported suffering more from chronic conditions than atheists or agnostics. They also reported more symptoms of disease than those with no religious preference. We can hypothesize as to why this may be the case. Religious people tend to be poorer and also minorities, both groups who have higher health complications as compared to highly educated whites, which make up a lot of the agnostic atheist category. People with more health problems may be more motivated to become affiliated with a religious group as a means of coping and support. In terms of psychological well-being, however, the affiliated, that is the religious and no preference group, the spiritual group, tended to fare better than either atheists or agnostics. Both of these groups reported better mean happiness, better mean self-esteem, and lower mean anxiety in comparison with atheists and agnostics. Both groups also had significantly lower mean symptoms of depression in comparison with agnostics only. And agnostics tend to do a little bit worse than atheists when it comes to psychological disturbances because of that, existential unknowingness on, whether there is a God, there isn't a God. It leads to more mental tribulation as opposed to atheists who are much more sure of the fact that there isn't a God. They don't have that psychological imbalance. Affiliated individuals also had higher mean levels of life satisfaction and lower levels of death anxiety in comparison to agnostics, which I talk about more in this video right here, my video series on existential psychology. Both affiliated individuals and those with no religious preference, the spiritual group, were more optimistic than either atheists or agnostics. The affiliated group, the religious group, had the highest mean levels of meaning in life, with those with no preference having somewhat lower levels, and atheist agnostics having lower levels still. Conversely, affiliated individuals also had higher levels of compassion than members of any of the three non-affiliated groups. Religious individuals were also more forgiving of others than agnostics and more forgiving of themselves than either atheists or agnostics. In terms of social support, social health, and relationships, those affiliated with a religious group reported both giving and receiving more mean emotional support than members of any of the three unaffiliated categories. They were also less lonely than agnostics. Finally, in terms of health behaviors, those with any religious affiliation engaged in less cigarette smoking than atheists or those with no religious preference. Alcohol use differed significantly between all groups. Those with any religious affiliation drank the least on average, followed by agnostics, then by spiritual, those with no religious preference, with atheists reporting the most drinking, which I talk about a lot more in this video also. The full study with marginal means separated for each group is linked below. As people become more educated and secularized, they tend to lose their religious salience. They become more educated, they become more affluent, they become physically healthier also, which is great. If that is what our measure of success is, then it's all well and good. We don't have to worry about deaths of despair. But if we account for broader ideals, divine concepts such as forgiveness, compassion, altruism towards ourselves and others, hope, gratitude, social cohesion, marriage rates, which I didn't even touch on, stable family units, rearing more children, right? Religious people tend to have more children. Less suicide, less despair, then no, the picture is not all good. The trend lines are going down and down and down for faith, and the trend lines for deaths of despair are going up and up and up. Let's end with a verse from the Holy Quran. Those who disbelieved, their deeds are like a mirage in a lowland, which a thirsty one thinks is water, until when he comes to it, he finds it is nothing but Allah before him. The imagery is so striking. We are each, even in spite of our PhDs and our MDs and our trust funds and our stock portfolios and our Lamborghinis, we are each the thirsty vagrant, the thirsty nomad in search of replenishment. For some, the call to transcendence is through Islam. For others, it is Buddhism, Zoroastrianism. For others, it's simply giving back to their community. Find a path and commit to it. This is the best psychological advice. If you were coming to this office to sit down and engage in an intake session with me, followed by therapy, the maxim, the mantra is find a path and commit to it. I have had hundreds of clinical patients in rooms like this one, schools, prison cells, and the formula is just that. Intervention manuals, some of which are sitting right here, are secularized versions of ancient manuscripts. I would say that they're lesser versions because there is no inclusion of morality, selflessness, and divinity. The shortcoming, the take-home message, has to be that this individual treatment, as we see in this her commercial, just her rolling around in the bed, it doesn't account for the crippling loss of religious spiritual community. As the article states, there are no secular alternatives which have taken over in place of the cohesiveness that religion once did, and still does in non-Western societies, as I talked about showing these videos from Pakistan. I don't want to make it seem like this is all true for all corners of the world, right? We need some avenue, some orientation, some pathway to a transcendent calling. Thank you all so much. PsychExpert.com in the description below, as well as all of the research journals, which I talked about in this video, as well as some of the film clips. Thank you all so much, and I will see you on the next episode. Peace.